Amani Abu Zaid, South Africa's Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, His Excellency Gwede Mantashe, and the IEA Executive Director, Fatih Birol. I now hand the floor over to Commissioner Abu Zaid to deliver her welcome remarks. Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Gwede Mantashe, Minister from Energy and South Africa, Dr. Muhammad Shakir, Minister of Electricity, Egypt, and Chair of the African Union STC, my brother, Dr. Fatih Birol, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished participants, I'm really delighted to welcome you to the second Ministerial Forum organized by the African Union Commission and the International Energy Agency. This follows the first year, last year, which was in Addis Ababa at the African Union headquarters. So now and today it's organized by Republic of South Africa, the current chair of the African Union, and it was going to be held physically, but I'm sure you understand that due to the COVID-19 crisis, we're holding it virtually with the hope that soon we will meet again physically and have interact in a much better way. That said, I'm happy that technology has helped us or is helping us, hold this meeting. The objective of these fora, the ones that we organized with the IEA, is to bring together energy officials, thinkers, practitioners from across not only Africa, but the world, actually. And even though that at the African Union, we are focused on Africa, of course, but we are also, and the purpose of this partnership is to enrich our work in Africa and to get the support and the cross-fertilization from across the world and to benefit from the excellent work that IEA is and has been doing for a long time. Our theme today is securing Africa's energy future in the wake of COVID-19, facilitating faster recovery through increased investments, innovation, and partnership. You will see that there are a number of key participants from across the board who will be joining us and contributing to our discussions today. As I'm sure you know, at the wake of the declaration of the pandemic, the African Union, chaired by His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa and current chair of the African Union, Africa developed a strategy for recovery and resilience. Now, the way we are seeing resilience and recovery, that we want to recover better, we want to recover fast. And we want to use and to turn this major crisis, global crisis, into an opportunity for our continent. And this will only happen if we rethink our approaches and double up in particularly when it comes to energy and digitalization. It is also important that our recovery delivers jobs, supports livelihoods, and that it is inclusive, especially for women and youth. That said, of course, green approaches and green energy help us very much in that regard, knowing how much, this not only can facilitate the access, but also the security, the energy security. I'm really happy to see that across the continent, countries are working in improving the energy mix, which is a good sign, but we need to do more, and we need to do different sometimes. We need to do more also when it comes to the urgent task of making sure that facilities, health facilities, have access to electricity, that the rural areas have access to electricity. Mini-grid, off-grid, and decentralized units give us a great opportunity towards that end. Also, clean cooking is and should be seriously considered in our approaches, knowing that it fragilizes the health of many of our populations.
I will resign as deputy. They say they make you deputy. No, after you find your friend, after you find
Commissioner, kindly unmute. We lost your sound. Please unmute. Apologies for the
Yeah.
inconvenience.
A robust energy sector, I was saying, is necessary to build upon the policy gains so far made in encouraging off-grid investments with high participation of the private sector also. The African Union Commission has been at the forefront of leading harmonization of policy and regulatory framework in the energy sector in Africa to stimulate investments and build a strong energy market. Another important aspect is the need for tapping into the innovations of digitalization and creative business models, especially from the private sector. Today's forum will benefit from the inputs of private sector, other stakeholders, and of course the member states, the officials, the governments, to shape further improvements to policy and strategy for a fast, green, a resilient and inclusive recovery. In this connection, the forum will start also with an overview of the IEA World Energy Outlook. And I seize this opportunity to thank again the IEA for the fantastic work they are doing and for the excellent collaboration, especially when it comes to supporting many of the databases that we are developing on the continent, which are the basis for good and sound policy making and decision making. I am eagerly looking forward to listen, to share with you, to interact with everyone here present. And with these remarks, I thank you all for your kind attention, and I give the floor back to the moderator. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, colleagues, greetings from Paris, IEA headquarters. I am the director of the International Energy Agency in Paris. So I am thankful to my colleague, Mrs. Abu Zaid, but also thankful to our co-host, the South African Minister Mantashe, for helping to bring this meeting together. This year's IEA and African Union meeting comes at a time that COVID is in the middle of economy, COVID is in the middle of energy, COVID is in the middle of health. So therefore, we have thought this year's our discussions to focus on two things. One, how COVID affected the African energy system, different countries and in general Africa. And two, what can we do to get out of this rather concerning, worrying situation African energy markets are as a result of COVID. So I am so happy to see that the efforts of Minister Mantashe, efforts of the African Union and the IEA brought some 20 key countries with 16 ministers from Africa together. And these 20 countries make about 75% of the energy consumption in entire Africa. So 75% is today around this virtual table. So we are very happy, we are very proud, as well as several businesses, industries in power, oil, and international organizations, and as well as non-governmental organizations. Now, I wanted to tell you that the COVID is affecting, of course, we all know, the economy around the world, the energy system. But when it comes to Africa, and I have a couple of numbers to show you how serious the situation is in Africa. Even though the pandemic effect in terms of health on African continent was not as severe as some other parts of the world, in terms of, first of all, the economy, there was a major hit. our numbers show that on a GDP per capita basis, Africa is this year 6% poorer than last year. So in other words, the GDP per capita falls down about 6%. This is the problem number one. Problem number two, debt issue. The growing debt issue in many African countries, and in some countries we see some default positions of some countries, which is very worrying. And we all know that compared to past debt issues, this time the situation is different. It is not the World Bank, it is not the this country or that country. There's a lot of private funds which are going to be hopefully at the table to discuss a moratorium or similar solutions. This is the second in terms of economy. Third, on electricity. Dear colleagues, every year we follow since 20 years, some of the colleagues here know how many people have no access to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa and in Africa in general. Every year we say improvement, no improvement, improvement, no improvement. In the last 7 years, we have seen that despite the population growth, number of people that have no access to electricity declined. It was a very good news. 7 years in a row, there was a very good trend of more and more people gained access to electricity in Africa. But 2020, this year, we saw for the first time after 7 years, the trend reversed, and now more people in 2020 have no access to electricity compared to 2019. So this is very worrying, and the 7 years of a good progress is reversed as a result of COVID. Fourth problem, fourth impact of COVID, which is, in my view, much more fundamental. The energy investments, especially electricity investments in Africa, declines this year by 30% decline, 30% decline of all energy investment, the biggest decline in any continent. And what does this mean? This means that rather bad trend I told you, that the reversing the access to electricity trend may be even longer because investment is lagging very, very badly, 30%. This is another worry I have. The last worry as a result of COVID I see today is what is happening in some of the countries in Africa whose economies are relying on oil and gas revenues. We have ministers today from Algeria, Nigeria, Gabon, and others. So their economies are, as a result of the big drop in oil and gas demand and prices, are negatively affected, and they are seeing a major challenge in front of them. So to sum up, dear colleagues, not only the economy of the Africa is negatively affected, but we see in power sector, in investments, and also in some countries, oil and gas production revenues are badly affected. So it is the reason we came here together at the invitation of Madam Commissioner and myself, with having our great host of South Africa, to discuss how is the situation in different countries and how we can help to mobilize the investments in your countries, how we can offer you advice from solar energy to natural gas, from natural gas to efficiency, from efficiency to other capacity building. We are here and we would like to hear from you. And many thanks again for all these ministers covering 75% of the continent's energy use today to come to the African Union IEA meeting. With these words, I would like to stop here and go back to my dear colleague, Madam Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Birol, for these for your intervention and for the pertinent statistics that you have, as always, provided us with. I believe that now we are going to maybe start this first session almost. Now, I invite His Excellency, Minister Gwede Mantashe, Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy of South Africa, and the host of this event, to please take the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Excellencies, co-chairpersons, Dr. Amani Abu Zaid and Dr. Fatih Birol. Your Excellencies, ministers and deputy ministers, heads of delegations, leaders of industry and of industrial organizations, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Madam Program Director, for giving us this opportunity. We appreciate the opportunity to continue our collective engagement as African countries and our partners on important strategic subject of economic recovery and energy sustainability. It is our pleasure to co-host this August gathering as part of South African chairship of the AU. We must also appreciate and commend the African Union Commission and IEA for working together with us to convene in this forum of strategic participants in the continent and global energy space, especially given the extreme difficulty brought about by the advent of COVID-19. Let me register that, when we were confronted by COVID-19, we're having a choice because there were emphasis on saving lives. And then there was another emphasis on saving livelihoods. And people saw that as a contradiction, and then we had to be innovative to ensure that we balance the approach and save lives and save livelihoods. Let me share you my experience in South Africa. When there was a lockdown, we said energy must not be closed. It must operate at full capacity, both in coal mining and in energy. But we discovered something that was very strange. With energy, demand collapsed, and therefore supply had to collapse, not because it was locked down, but because demand collapsed. And that is what we should be talking about now. How does it recover? We made a comparison last week of the two sectors under our ministry. We discovered that mining is now 2.5% below the level it was in at the beginning of COVID. It has recovered because we're pragmatic and forceful, and we're very systematic in our approach. Energy is lagging behind, but we're waiting for the statistics for third quarter to see whether we are recovering. And to us, the most important thing is a V-shaped recovery curve, as opposed to a dog-leg recovery curve, which is not as convincing. We're beginning to see V-shaped recovery curve in our case. Now, the impact of COVID-19 on the economy was very drastic and hard, and caused hardship to many people. It has deepened the scourge of poverty, unemployment, and trends in our society by leaders of apartheid and colonialism. Now, as a continent, One of the things we're appreciating with free trade agreement in the continent is that we are beginning to say we must structure ourselves as a continent of the future with all the opportunities, with a big part of our population not having access to energy. In South Africa, which we say we're doing relatively well in a continent where we're located, 87% of our population have access to electricity. And we're left with 13% who have universal access to electricity. But this number is not reduced fast enough because as we supply electricity, new informal settlement emerge and demand more electricity. And that is an issue that we must address. We believe that a strong recovery is possible through a determined targeted action that restore economic growth and protect livelihoods. And that targeted implementation must take place in the key identified areas to bring urgent stabilization, stimulate growth, building confidence, and enhance competitiveness. Jobs and growth will be stimulated through infrastructure development program, industrialized centers, localization, export sector growth, with energy security as the flywheel for growth and development. Our belief is that energy is not just, it's a flywheel, it is a actually going to drive and trigger growth. And therefore investment in energy is going to help us. The only thing that we always appeal to developed economies is that we have committed ourselves to reduce carbon emissions. That commitment is not shaking, but an expectation to move from one extreme to the other is too much of an expectation. Allow us to have a balanced approach, have access to all a combination of energy technologies and sources as we move to low carbon emissions, rather than think that we can swing like a pendulum from one extreme to the other. So that appeal is an appeal for support by developed economies to allow us to develop systematically rather than being ad hoc in our development. Now, we have just developed an economic reconstruction and recovery plan. And many people said, no, it's not convincing. I tried to explain to a number of them, I said, the difference between that recovery and reconstruction plan is that it is not only limited to macroeconomic analysis, it is also giving targets and responsibility to sectors in the productive economy. And our argument is that unless we drive and develop productive economic sectors, we're not going to see the overall growth. So basing your analysis only to overall GDP growth is nice to have, but when you begin to put targets to the productive sectors of the economy, you are being practical and you are put people at a situation where they must account for the sector they are responsible for. That is the nature of the plan that we have got. And we hope that we're going to begin to see change. We've identified that, listen, mining, we move fast. When we're at level 5, we open coal. When we're level 4, we open cast. When we're at level 2, we open all mining. And that made it to recover faster. And we had a sector like tourism, which was totally smashed by COVID-19 because there was no movement of people. But the targets were put on that sector are practical for the sector itself to follow. Because I don't see the time. I don't see the time. I don't want to go over my time. But again, lastly, let me give you an example. I appeal to all of you to download our integrated resource plan. You will see that we've allocated various technologies and sectors, amounts of megawatts they must generate up to 2030. And when you analyze that IRP, you'll see that the biggest growth has been allocated to renewables. But we've allocated portions to all the other sectors, including nuclear, little bit of coal, because we want to continue experimenting with cleaner coal energy technologies. And we've allocated some to gas. We're making discoveries that are encouraging on gas and oil. We're hoping that that will be a game changer for our economy. Let me close by highlighting that one sector that is underdeveloped in our economy is the LPG sector, where bottled gas is not given the appropriate gravity of impact on the economy. We're paying attention to that so that we can actually grow a balanced economy in various regions of the country. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I see there is a noise that says my time is up. Thank you very much for that. But I think that when we share these experiences, the intention is to also appeal for support and sharing of that information so that we can cooperate and work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for this insightful intervention and for sharing with us the challenges, the concerns, and the actions that, the bold actions that your country has been leading locally, I mean, nationally, but also across the continent. And yes, I join you in your appeal as well. It gives me now pleasure to invite His Excellency, Professor Mohammed Shakir Al-Marqabi, Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy of Egypt and Chair of the African Union Specialized Committee for Transboundary, Transcontinental Infrastructure, Energy and Tourism. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the government of Egypt, and indeed on my own behalf, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the African Union Commission and to the International Energy Agency for organizing the second AUC-IEA Ministerial Forum under the theme Securing Africa's Energy Future in the wake of COVID-19. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, while our meeting today comes at a critical moment where the entire world is struggling to address the challenges caused by COVID-19 pandemic, urgent action should be taken to ensure sustainable energy is an integral part of the global COVID-19 response. Furthermore, the crisis underscores the need for reliable, sustainable, and affordable energy access. As you all know, 600 million people in sub-Sahara Africa do not have access to electricity, and around 900 million people lack access to clean cooking. Addressing these challenges must be our priority and collective responsibility to scale up investment in the energy sector to meet Africa's energy needs. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, several barriers can block needed investment in energy sector. These include lack of transparency, low level of involvement of private sector, fragmented legal and regulatory framework, significant subsidies, unclear institutional architecture in some countries, and lack of regulatory incentive mechanism. Let me briefly share with you what Egypt has done to address these matters and to create enabling environment for energy transition in Egypt. During the last 5 years, the electricity sector in Egypt has grown rapidly to meet the growing increased demand and to overcome the raised challenges. Security and reliability of energy supply has been on the top priorities of the government agenda. Since 2014 till now, the total capacities added to the grid reached more than 28,000 megawatts. This was much more greater than what was available in 2014. What we had at that time did not exceed 24,000 megawatts at that time. But we could manage actually to cross this gap, and we have a surplus of energy now. Currently, the sector is focusing on the improvement of and upgrading the national grid to comply with international standards. Serious Actions has been taken to develop the transmission and distribution network in 6 years. For example, on the 500 kV network, we increased the length by 1.5 times. We increased the number of substations by 4 times. We added almost more than 15 distribution control centers, and under construction twice as much from this one. In addition to use the rapid, prepaid, and smart meters within our strategy to transition to smart grids, which will contribute significantly to improve electricity efficiency and reduce carbon emission, as well as reduce the investment required for infrastructure for electrical networks. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, recovery measures for the post-pandemic period provide a unique opportunity in Africa to accelerate energy transition, driven by renewables while leaving no one behind. The recent advances in renewables energy technologies and cost reductions provided the opportunity to pursue a much less carbon intensive model of the development than seen in many other parts of the world. In this context, Egyptian electricity sector has started its journey long time ago to accelerate the deployment of low carbon electricity sources. Egypt has a potential to produce 90,000 megawatts of renewables. To utilize this potential and integrate a sustainable energy strategy for the year 2035 was approved, in which the share of renewables energy in the energy mix will reach 42% by the year 2035. Now we will achieve 1 year ahead of the schedule our first target by reaching 6,400 megawatt renewables energy capacity by the end of next year, which represent almost 20% from the expected maximum peak load at that time. To achieve our ambitious vision in utilizing the renewable resources, a lot of procedures have been taken to encourage private sector participation in the energy sector projects. As a result, 32 international and local investors were involved to implement Binban Solar Park project, the largest one in the Middle East and Africa, with an overall capacity of 1,465 megawatt or as a solar park. The project won the best project prize worldwide by the World Bank in the year 2019. It is worth to mention that the latest prices we got under the BOO scheme are $2 per kilowatt hour for solar and $3 per kilowatt hour for wind. I wish to take this opportunity to give you some updates on the Egyptian Energy Strategy 2035 that was prepared in collaboration with the European Union. The strategy included construction of clean coal plants, but currently we removed this from the strategy and we replaced this completely by the renewable energy. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, regional interconnection is one of the fundamental pillars of the long-term sustainable development. It would help to improve the resilience of countries' energy system by providing access to the diverse and complementary markets, and help countries take advantage of economies of scale. Governments and utilities across the continent need to step up, coordinate together in order to increase investment in the transmission infrastructure, establish regional markets, and improve regulation for cross-border trading. With its strategic location and improved infrastructure, Egypt is moving towards becoming a regional hub for energy trade. Egypt is participating actively now in all regional electrical interconnection projects, such as the interconnection with Arab Ashraq countries, interconnection with Arab Maghreb countries, interconnection with Saudi Arabia, will be connected, which will be connected to Gulf countries and to Asia. Also, Egypt is connected with Jordan, and from which to Iraq to transfer. We're working to increasing to transfer up till 2,000 megawatt. In the context of Africa, Egypt is connected now with the Sudan. Egypt also, under the umbrella of African Union, in cooperation with the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, is championing the African Continental Transmission Network Master Plan to link Africa with Europe and Asia and utilize the great potential of the continent. Currently, we are studying the interconnection with Cyprus and Greece, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the global energy system is experiencing a significant change driven by the blend of innovation, digital transformation of the energy sector, rapidly gaining attention, offering new opportunities and new markets to help deliver efficient, affordable, and reliable electricity to customers. Green hydrogen also is getting great attention as a very promising source of energy. Currently, Egypt is in the process of updating its energy strategy plan 2035 to include green hydrogen, and now we are in our way to implement the first pilot project to use green hydrogen in one of our power stations. Achieving the required scale of energy financing in Africa is a collective action by all public and private stakeholders to create enabling conditions for developing bankable projects, reform utilities, and supporting African countries in strengthening energy policy, regulation, and sector governance. In addition to develop a public-private partnership for innovative financing solutions. In this regard, I wish to express our full readiness to work hand in hand with our fellow African countries to share our experience and best practice to address these matters. As I am coming to the end of my remarks, I would like to highlight the following recommendations. First, mobilizing investment for developing power system in Africa is challenging but achievable. We need to strengthen cooperation between countries and regional and continental organizations and institutions. Second, it is important to ensure, while developing our infrastructure in Africa, to be climate resilient. Third, we must go for practical cooperation aimed at capacity building, technology and knowledge transfer, best practice and experience sharing. Finally, we must go for green and low carbon and build Africa energy sector in a way that allow higher economic growth to be sustainable and inclusive. I wish to conclude by expressing the full commitment of Egypt to work with all of you to fight together during this tough time and build together resilient energy system on a suitable manner. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shakir Markabi, for an uplifting intervention, and to congratulate you and Egypt as an example of an African country for the spectacular achievements tackling all fronts, increasing capacity, a highly improved energy mix, tackling transmission, smart technologies, regional outreach, and I'm sure we all welcome the readiness to also to work and collaborate with our brothers and sisters across the continent in improving and in accelerating energy access, security, and improve the mix. With that, I would like to turn the floor to the co-host, Dr. Fatih Birol, and I thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. So, ladies and gentlemen, next year there is a very important summit. There are many important ones, but when it comes to energy and climate change, a key one in Glasgow. We call it COP26, and this meeting will be chaired by UK together with Italy. We are extremely fortunate to have the Mr. Minister of State for Business, Energy and Clean Growth, Minister Kwasi Kwarteng with us. Mr. Minister, thank you very much for agreeing to be with us and with all the African ministers around the continent together. You heard from two important players, Mr. Minister, from South African minister, and from North Africa, the Egyptian minister, reiterating their commitment to clean energy transitions. And I think this is a very good pass to you to talk about the COP26 and your ambitions as United Kingdom. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much, Fatih. It's always a pleasure to come to the IEA and participate in events which you're chairing. I was very pleased to hear the minister's remarks. Egypt is a country I know well. I've visited many times. I've yet to visit South Africa, unfortunately, but I hope to make amends very shortly. And of course, my own family hails from West Africa in Ghana. Both my parents were born in the Gold Coast, as it was then called, in the 1940s. So I'm very familiar to a certain degree with Africa, and it's a continent which holds a special place in my heart. It's a real pleasure, actually, to be here to discuss the energy future of this great continent. COVID-19 has posed significant challenges across the world. It has set back efforts to deliver access to energy to the 550 million people across Africa who currently lack it. Investment in the sector, unfortunately, has also fallen significantly. But as we now look to deliver a sustainable and resilient recovery, I think there are many opportunities to build back better and to build back greener. Africa, as we all know, has some of the richest sources of renewable energy on the planet. Energy, I might add, that is cost competitive, that is capable of rapid deployment, and which generates skilled jobs and also increasingly attracts international investment. An economic recovery powered by clean energy is now the rational choice. As COP26 president, in partnership with Italian friends and colleagues, you will find the UK a very eager and willing partner in unlocking the potential of clean energy to drive economic growth and meet our shared climate change objectives. With our COP26 energy transition campaign, we are already working very collaboratively to improve and increase technical assistance, to drive investment, and also to provide policy support so that clean power becomes absolutely the most attractive option for all African countries. Our collaboration with the African Union through our strategic partnership is also a key consideration for us in our preparations for COP26, a COP that we know needs to work very closely with Africa. The UK and African Union have just jointly agreed a Green Recovery Action Plan for Africa, developed in consultation with the UN and the South African Ministry of the Environment. It will help deliver the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development and the 2063 Africa Agenda. To support this work, we in the UK have proposed an African Union-led task force on climate change to bring together political, financial, and technical actors in order that we can build and increase momentum for climate finance solutions, which can also work directly for the African continent. I'm sure that today's forum will be an extremely valuable contribution to our thinking as we drive and push these initiatives forward. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Thank you, Fatih, for hosting me. And as I say, it's been an honor and a privilege for me to address my remarks to you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. You have a huge task in front of you, COP26, but the world is watching, and as IEA, we have all the trust, the UK leadership, together with Italy, that we will get very good news from Glasgow, and it will mirror the success story of Paris 5 years ago, and we will be very happy to support you in every step you are going to take, Mr. Minister.
Thank you.
Dear colleagues, we have also Italian Foreign Minister, Deputy Foreign Minister, but he has been asked to go to Parliament briefly, and he will join us in a few minutes. In this respect, I will go back again, my colleague Madam Commissioner, to start the next session, please.
Thank you very much, Fatih, and it's also a pleasure to hear, the intervention of His Excellency Minister from UK, and indeed the African Union has been holding several meetings with the UK about the task force to COP26, and really happy with the declaration and the joint work that we are developing together. This is now the time where I would invite Ms. Laura Cozzi, the Chief Energy Modeler of the International Energy Agency, to make her presentation, and then she will be followed, her presentation will be followed by a presentation by the African Union. But first, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Laura Cozzi. Please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you. I will just focus my interventions on our latest findings related to the World Energy Outlook in Africa. 3 key issues. First, what's happening to electricity access. Second, what's happening to investments. And third, the very concrete opportunities that sustainable recoveries offer for Africa. First, let's start, I refer back to what the Executive Director pointed out earlier. We have seen for many years, tracking year over year, bad news coming out of the continent with a number of people without access growing. But as of 2013, we were extremely happy to give this news to the world. We are seeing tremendous progress happening throughout many countries, from Senegal to South Africa to Ethiopia, Ghana and more, really reducing the number of people without access. We were extremely happy to see this, a combination of push on grids and centralized renewables and off-grid solution. What we're seeing, unfortunately, now is that COVID is putting this to a halt. For the first time in 7 years, the number of people without access in the continent will go up. There are 3 main reasons for this that we are detecting. First is really the capacity of governments to deal with multiple crises happening at the same time. Of course, there was the urgent need to focus the attention on health and relief. Second, that is happening is really on the ground companies, especially the one working in the distributed space, having difficulties with the number of issues being locked down, but also really the supply chains internationally. And this is slowed down very significantly solar home systems distribution in certain parts of the continent. And third is affordability. Unfortunately, with the COVID crisis, as our executive director mentioned earlier, GDP per capita are going down. In particular, this is affecting the poorest part of the societies. Our assessment is that by the end of this year, 30 million people in Africa that currently have electricity connections may not be able to pay for them. So some support there will really be needed to ensure that the utilities on one hand continue to produce, and the other hand, the poorest part of the societies is put in the right conditions. When we look at investments, Africa is not an exception compared to what we are seeing globally. Investments in the energy sector have gone down by around 20%. Africa is more than that. We are seeing investment contracting by 30%. Similarly to the rest of the world, the 2 sectors that are most impacted are coal and oil. Good news is that renewables are remaining resilient. In fact, renewables, we have just heard from Egypt, but across the continent, we have many good news with increased investment in renewables. Here, I would like to say, Honorable Kwarteng mentioned this, the potential is huge, but one key point to bring to everyone's attention, including the international community. When we look at cost of financing, and this is what we have done, looking cost of financing country by country in Africa over the past 6 months, we're seeing the cost of financing, cost of borrowing going up. This has significant implication for investment in energy. This makes the cost of energy projects, especially the capital intensive ones, go up. And if we take one example, solar, which is the area where we see the largest potential going forward, this would mean that over the past 6 months alone, basically the cost of electricity generated by solar with this cost of financing in Africa has gone up by 25%. This is completely in contrast with what we are seeing in other parts of the world, where solar is becoming the cheapest form of electricity because technology cost is going down and financing cost is going down. So this is an area where the international community, banks, donors need to look very, very carefully, because it's just not possible that we are wiping off the technology cost advantages and the resource advantages just because of higher cost of finance. Finally, looking at sustainable recoveries, this is analysis that we have done earlier this year upon a call of the executive director back in March, looking with the International Monetary Fund, what is the potential of opportunities within Africa to put forward sustainable recoveries. We are seeing this already happening in many, many countries, and certainly also under the leadership of Amani Abu Zaid with the AUC. Our analysis shows 60 billion invested in the next 3 years in the energy sector could bring, first, increasing jobs, 500,000 jobs a year. Which sectors are we looking at? First is really electricity. Grids, crucial, big grids, but also mini grids. Let's not forget this is a big area going forward. Power plants, clearly renewable, solar, looking at the cost of finances is going to be essential. Second big area, clean cooking. Here I want to give one number about LPG. With oil prices going down, there is a huge opportunity here that Africa can catch. The cost for a family now to buy LPG bottles is much, much smaller than the one we were seeing last year. It's 3 times smaller. Huge opportunity to put in place now and distribute LPG bottles, bring new jobs, and especially targeting women, as was mentioned really earlier. Final point there, you see a big chunk, which is efficiency. Another, there is a number of actions that go, depending on the country, from infrastructure that can be roads. In some cases, we are seeing new minerals and investments in really the global energy transition. We are seeing cobalt, depending on the country, cobalt, lithium, and others, huge opportunities going forward. But one key point is going to be really investing in climate resilient infrastructure. So with those three, basically 3 points, access is reversing, but big focus altogether of the international community in looking at the financing cost. With good policies, there is a huge opportunity for the African continent as a whole to get out of this crisis much stronger. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Laura, for these eye-opening statistics and information, which are and should be, at the basis of our approaches and strategies as we go forward, and also for drawing our attention to the potential and to the opportunities that are within our reach. True, they need investment, but I'm confident that we can find ways, to see them, materializing on this continent. Now, it gives me great pleasure to invite my brother and the director, Engineer Sheikh Bedda, the director of the Infrastructure Energy Department of the African Union Commission. Mr. Bedda, vous avez la parole. Merci.
Merci, Excellence, Madame la Commissaire. Good afternoon, Excellency co-chairs, honorable ministers, and I'm really pleased to present before you the EU recovery plan for post-COVID, the action that are undertaken by African Union really towards the fight against COVID-19, but also to recover from it. And my presentation will be structured as follows. Next slide, please. So I will give an introduction, and also I will highlight the impact of COVID-19 on the African sector, on the African energy sector, and which kind of response and recovery plan that we put in place, and then I will give some conclusion. Of course, it is going without saying that the COVID-19 has severely tested the resilience of our energy sector, and many concerted efforts are required today, specifically to ensure the survival of our institution, specifically the utilities, and also to maintain the focus on targets, including the access but also to contribute to the fight COVID-19, and also to ensure that we put in place a support recovery. And we have here some concrete initiative that we have ADB as a group and as financial arm of the African Union has created a 10 billion COVID-19 response facility, but also African Union Commission put also in place a fund that is aiming to really fight against COVID-19 and to ensure the recovery also later on. Next slide. And as impacts, and it was highlighted by Excellency Commissioner, but also the Executive Director of IEA, that unfortunately we've seen electricity demand dropping very drastically, 10–40% drop depending on the measures taken. And the example of South Africa is very illustrated, and we've seen 6,000 megawatt drop from the demand, and but also we've seen the price of Brent crude fell from 59 in February to 20 a barrel in April. And the example of Nigeria as exports decline also approximately about 14–19 billion in 2020. This, of course, impact very clearly also by 25% the revenue for power utilities, and many of them already declared the force majeure clauses because exactly of the drop of revenue. Next, please. Of course, the impact of this, all these elements that highlighted before was very strong, specifically in terms of project implementation and on ongoing and planned activities, specifically when it comes to the implementation of a specific project in energy sector. And as we see, ADB predicts COVID-19 significant widening of fiscal deficit in infrastructure, almost 100 billion across the continent, make it harder to meet the set target before. And this has also a very huge impact on the operational component, service or office meetings, response time, etc. And but also safety and health of our staff in utilities, and also this impact also how we can keep also our staff motivated, how to keep also our operational budget when it comes to the also the services, in addition to the investment also, as was highlighted by different intervention today. Next, please. But as a first response to this, we as African Union Commission, we try to take the lead under the leadership of the South African presidency of the Union, but also specifically under the leadership of the chair of the subcommittee, Dr. Shaker, who is with us today, and under the leadership of Commissioner. We had different bureau meetings of African energy ministers. We managed to also together all utilities at the level of CEOs. We engage with different partners, AUDA, NEPAD, ECA, EU, IRENA, and World Bank, really to try to come up with a clear plan for recovery. And of course, we organize also various awareness events and webinars. And this lead us to put in place a concerted efforts. To name a few of them, the STC Declaration of Response and Recovery, including establishment of COVID Response Task Force, comprising member states, AUC and Cape Pan-African Institution, including ADB. Also, AUC and Pan-African Institution joint programs with partners to promote electrification of health facilities. This is a very strong component of our recovery plan. With also EU, through the EU TAF, AUC designed a COVID response and recovery plan, which is divided by, two short and medium and long-term files and packages. And also we managed to put in place different instruments really to facilitate the recovery of utilities, and we manage also to sensitize different partners to put a moratorium on the payment of electricity bills, and also to help utilities to put in place of provision of free electricity for vulnerable section of society. This measure was also undertaken by different member states. Next, please. So in terms of recovery plan, there is a very inclusive and participatory approach, which include key actors, member states, Nepal, AUC, UN agencies, development partners, industry, private sector, and we have, as I explained, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. For short-term, for example, the support to utilities and off-grid mini-grids providers, support supply continuity to vulnerable population, electrify health facilities, subsidize clean cooking, and also efforts in terms of renewable energy, and to continue to improve the access. And unfortunately, we've seen the data provided now by AE alarming us, all of us, really to try to address this matter and to avoid any. Can you go back, please? To avoid. No. Can you go back? No. I think you miss. Yes, please. Thank you. So I was saying that the issue of access is very central for us, really, to keep the momentum, and also to try to increase the access, and specifically in terms of recovery, short-term recovery plan. Medium term, we have we prepared also for economic recovery by continuing efforts in renewable energy and access, and by ensuring the business continuity for key energy institutions, the retention of human resources, and develop strategy for clean cooking solution. And of course, our long-term plan is really to implement strategy for universal access, finance large-scale off-grid and mini-grid projects, implement clean cooking strategies, and of course, improve the resilience of the entire process when it comes to the project design. Next, please. So as a conclusion, we have been severely impacted, unfortunately, by the COVID-19, and this was a real test for our resilience. And we managed to put in place a concerted efforts, and we have taken proactive steps and mobilized partners for fast, resilient, and sustainable recovery. And ADB is playing a huge role, in addition to the political role that we are playing, all of us. And of course, Excellency, before I end my presentation, I would like also to remind that we will have an STC at the subcommittee level, 30 November and 1st December, really, when we are inviting all energy ministers across the continent, really also to see and to update the action plan, and to also maybe to provide more guidance to all our institutions with regard to the recovery plan. So all ministers, African ministers here present are, of course, invited. We already sent, but also our partners are invited as observers. We already sent the invitation. And thank you very much for your kind attention, and over to you, Excellency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bedda, for this excellent presentation, for all the efforts from you and team, and also for reminding us and everyone with the important meeting of the energy ministers under the African Union flag very soon. And it is very important that all ministers, African ministers, participate, because we are really at a critical time. And we need to make sure that we are all on the right path going forward. If I may just add one little thing in your presentation, and here I am removing my co-host hat and putting back my African Union hat, is the element of gender. And we are calling, and we are issuing a call to governments in Africa to make sure that women in the recovery process, not only women be considered as when in the projects as beneficiaries, but also to make sure that across the value chain of infrastructure and energy, women-owned, women-led enterprises and women heads of projects are included in the value chain and in the procurement of these projects. With that, I would like to turn back to my colleague, the co-host, Dr. Fatih Birol. You have the floor. Thank you. And I thank you, Laura and Mr. Beda, of course.
Thank you very much to you too, Amani. So, dear colleagues, we heard from South African Minister, the position in South Africa, his preoccupations, and then we heard from Egyptian Minister, his country's commitment to clean energy transitions. And we heard from Mr. Kwarteng, the UK Energy Minister, the COP26, UK government's priorities and expectations in terms of the countries of the world, but especially from Africa. Then we have two excellent presentations. My colleague, Mrs. Kozi, our Chief Energy Modeler, and then from African Union, Mr. Beda, two forward-looking presentations. Now we are here to discuss the recovery. We all talk about a recovery, economic recovery. We all need an economic recovery. The world needs an economic recovery. But how do we think a sustainable recovery looks like from an energy angle, from an African angle? So we have three different perspectives. We are going to hear from three different corners. We will hear, first of all, with a very important country from Algeria, from Minister himself, followed by Dr. Mo Ibrahim. I think we all know Dr. Mo Ibrahim. He's going to talk us as the chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. And we also have the privilege to hear the Madam Commissioner of European Commission, Mrs. Kadri Simpson, Commissioner for Energy. Now, can I turn to Algeria? His Excellency Shams Eddin Chito, Minister of Energy, Transition and Renewable Energy, to hear your remarks, Mr. Minister. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence. Merci, Mesdames et Messieurs. C'est un privilège que d'être avec vous aujourd'hui pour discuter, échanger, proposer, en tout état de cause, apprendre. Donc, de ce fait, si vous permettez, en tant qu'universitaire, en tant que professeur, j'ai beaucoup travaillé sur l'énergie, donc j'ai une certaine vision philosophique du démarrage de l'Afrique que nous souhaitons tous. Je crois pouvoir dire qu'on parle de l'Afrique comme étant le continent du futur. C'est une bonne chose. Mais parlons du continent qui est en train de subir les affres des changements climatiques. Et le Covid, je vais en parler rapidement. Je rappelle simplement que les pays industrialisés ont quelque part lancé dans l'espace 1000 milliards de tonnes de CO2 qui nous reviennent sous forme de changement climatique. Et quels sont les pays qui traînent? Excusez-moi l'expression, ce sont les pays vulnérables. Et parmi les pays vulnérables, il y a l'Afrique. Donc, si je puis me permettre de proposer qu'on redimensionne à la lumière des nouveaux enjeux les fonds mis à disposition pour combattre les changements climatiques. Nous ne pourrons pas développer l'Afrique avec l'ancien schéma. On parle du Covid. Il faut vivre avec, nous allons vivre avec le Covid. Donc c'est une déconstruction nouvelle que nous sommes obligés de faire pour être en phase avec le monde du futur. Les transports seront de moins en moins sollicités. Donc c'est un nouveau schéma qu'il nous faut voir pour pouvoir prévoir une sorte de plan Marshall concernant l'énergie pour l'Afrique. Et l'énergie, ce n'est pas simplement des grandes centrales, c'est l'énergie de l'Internet. Il y a des formidables possibilités pour faire du solaire à l'échelle, j'allais dire, personnelle. C'est toutes ces possibilités qui permettront à l'Afrique de faire le bon. Mais il ne pourra pas être fait s'il n'y a pas une aide conséquente, désintéressée au nom d'une dette morale qu'il y a, à savoir ces changements climatiques. L'Afrique n'y est pour rien. Ceci étant dit, je vais dire quelques mots naturellement de l'Algérie. L'Algérie a pris les devants en mettant en place un ministère de la transition énergétique. Nous ne voulons pas tourner à 180 degrés, mais d'une façon apaisée sortir des fossiles. L'ère du fossile est derrière nous. Nous allons aller vers les énergies renouvelables. Nous avons mis en place une stratégie, à savoir d'abord rationaliser la consommation. Évidemment, il y a des sujets qui fâchent, les subventions. Nous sommes en train de nous y atteler. Mais le gros challenge que nous voulons faire, c'est de proposer, en tant que pays africain, un challenge à l'Europe. L'Europe veut mettre l'hydrogène vert. Mais quel meilleur point que le Sahara, qui va de l'Atlantique à la mer Rouge, pour pouvoir développer ce type de centrale, pour permettre d'avoir de l'électricité verte qui nous permettrait, avec des électrolyseurs, d'avoir cet hydrogène dont on ne parle pas. Donc, l'Europe va mettre 80 gigawatts. L'Afrique peut être l'un des réceptacles. Je voudrais ajouter qu'il y a d'énormes possibilités, mais il nous faut déconstruire le passé, revoir avec une nouvelle vision généreuse l'avenir et miser, encore une fois, sur la formation. De ce côté-là, les Africains devraient pouvoir, me semble-t-il, penser à des institutions capables de former les élites, de mettre en place ce plan renouvelable qui va donner à l'Afrique la possibilité de donner la pleine mesure de son talent. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. Merci pour cette intervention. The next is Mo Ibrahim. Dr. Mo Ibrahim is the chair and founder of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. Dr. Ibrahim, how do you see, as a leader of such a powerful foundation, the energy station in Africa in the context of COVID now, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Prior. Yeah, COVID really has, in my view, been so far rather benign in Africa. We did not suffer as big a health hit as in Europe or United States. We're fortunate in that context. The problem for us, I think, is more economic. Is a much more problem in the economic side than in the health area. It comes from different angles. First, of course, the disruption of the trade, and many countries are unable really to, unfortunately, we rely a lot on raw materials and sending our stuff to the Chinese and others, and that was disrupted. Oil prices plummeted, that hit the economies based on, unfortunately, again, and on just oil, like in Nigeria. And it was a problem for us in that sense. Tourism is gone, and that was supposed to be major economic area, employs a lot of people in Africa. African countries doesn't have the fiscal space which developed countries has. Developed economies assigned over $14 trillion to support their companies, their population, etc. We didn't have that fiscal space. The only help came out so far is a partial moratorium on small element of our debt. And I'm very much disappointed, unfortunately, with that reaction from the World Economy. I recall the call for action, which was issued jointly by some 9 European heads of states and a similar number of African heads of state very early on, which called for a fund of about $100 billion to support the reaction and the fight for COVID. Nice stuff, but where is the beef? There's nothing. Very little really. Unfortunately, a little bit disappointed in the action of our international partners. On the other side, and I have been always critical of quite a few of our African leadership on behavior in regard as their style of leadership and governance. But I must really applaud the way that many African leaders responded. They have been very responsible and very active. No doubt that Cyril Ramaphosa also played a good role in trying to coordinate joint action by people, etc. Right. After all this, where are we now? Clearly, energy is a very important issue for us in Africa. And we need to find a way now to move forward out of this. And I think the main issue really here, if I sum it, is 2 areas. One is funding, obviously. That's always a big issue in Africa, where the money will come from. Clearly, the money have to come from our own internal resources in the first instance. And I was hoping that a more generous debt relief or a more active role by the IMF in dealing with the special drawing rights. And I had a lot of discussion with our friend Kristalina on that issue, and she thought that few $100 billion can be made available. Unfortunately, the rupture in relationship between US and China is indirectly affecting everything we're trying to do in the global stage. That is a very sad situation. So that stuff has not materialized yet. That should have been a great injection for us to restart our economies yet. And I hope now, having new administration coming in the United States, that we really try to contain this effect of the emerging Cold War to make sure we are protecting vulnerable countries and vulnerable people. Because as the African proverb goes, when elephants fight, the grass suffer. So we can suffer really when those 2 guys start fighting. So that's something we hope will happen, and we'll continue to engage with the Americans, European Union, etc. And we say, hey, guys, where is action? What can we do? You're spending $14 billion here and $1 trillion here, and what is happening for Africa and for us? So there is hope really to move in a little bit in that direction. But it's very important also for us to acquire responsibility also. It's not just to sit back and hope some people come from across the sea to help us build our networks and our stuff here. We need to do our work. And the first point here is policy. And we need really a clear political will for our leader to say, right, this is not acceptable. We're going to do something about it. Policies translated into plans, translated into execution. That's important. And it is not difficult. It is easy if there is a political will to do that. We need to remove red tape. How much it takes, I mean, if you try to put a mini grid here or do, how much red tape you have to go through? That is a real problem. We need also to look at the more creative ways of financing our energy and our, because to be honest, we really need the private sector to get involved seriously in what we're doing. in the private sector, there is huge amount of money which cannot find a home. I know that, but I talk with those guys all the time and say, what, you know, Africa is risky, Africa is this, Africa is that. We need really to find a way to get those guys to come and put their money in Africa. Part of it, as I already discussed, is how we facilitate a better investment climate for people. This bureaucracy, red tape, etc., we need to deal with to make it much easier for that. We also need to look, when private sector come to invest, we have to be wide-eyed. We shouldn't be romantic. We don't think business people are a charitable organization. They are not. They are people trying to make money, to make profit. They will not come unless they think they can make a profit. How we can do that, given what they perceive as the risk of investment in Africa? Because Africa is seen as risk. I talk to a lot of people in these managing all these huge funds, and they always seek a premium. They call it an Africa premium. If they are happy to invest in Europe or in a developed economy and they accept a return of 6 or 7 or 8%, in Africa they want 15 and 20%. And I ask them why. They say, oh, it's the Africa premium. Why you want an Africa premium? Oh, because of risk. Risk of civil war, risk of rule of law, because so we need to attack that concept of risk in Africa. We need to de-risk Africa. Can only de-risk Africa also by good governance. And that's what I've been fighting in Africa. When we have rule of law, which ensure that business people, when they come to invest, that they will be treated honestly according to a clear rule of law. And I can cite to you many examples in Africa where some of our leaders just wrote really destroyed the rule of law in their countries. And I have a list of countries which investors say will never go into this country because the way they really renege on their contractual agreements. This is a shameful thing and we need to deal with it. So we have to start with ourselves also to make sure we are playing fair, playing honest. We have clear rule of law and we are the first to respect it. That is really important. And then we need a sense of urgency. This thing has to be done now. And I believe the future of energy in Africa is really in many grids. It's not in these massive power stations and no, because we should take a lesson from the development of mobile phones in Africa. That's the most successful thing Africa ever done. Why? Because just think of it, Africa is a huge space, huge space. People think of, I mean, you don't look at the map because Google manipulates the map to fit in a nice picture. Africa is huge and there's not many African people. Over half of our people live in rural area. And these rural areas where most of the people don't have access to clean energy. Now, those people are really spread over huge amount of space. The concept of a central grid going over deserts through forests, etc., is just nonsense. The same with the land-based telecom network. After 100 years, they only managed to produce 4 or 5 million lines. Look at the mobile industry. It came with 1 billion lines because the smartware was designed. You put your resources where the people are. So this scattered approach of building many grids around the people, it doesn't matter if it's not connected to the grids, main grid initially, that can come later. That is a fast approach, cheap approach, quick approach. We need to fight really intelligently here. We need the cheapest application which benefits the largest number of people in the shortest possible of time. And we need to really engage with the private sector because that's what is going to help us really to do that. That's where the money is. And it is simple. It is easy. That's what we really need to do with.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. I think you are you highlighted the key obstacle in front of the lack of energy investment in Africa, because when you make investment in energy, you look at first, is there demand for that energy? Yes, electricity demand is huge, as we all know. Access to electricity is huge. Second, you look if there is the cost of production is low. Yes, solar energy is the cheapest in Africa. I mean, 40% of the world's solar potential is in Africa, but yet the amount of solar electricity in Africa is equal to, we have the Vice Minister from Netherlands now, equal to Netherlands. Entire sub-Saharan solar electricity is equal to what we have in Netherlands. So what is the problem? The problem is African premium. How do we de-risk what we can do to minimize this African premium? Because, as I said, demand is there, the potential is there, solar is there, and how do we make the investment coming? De-risk it, it is a key issue, as you rightly mentioned. Now, I move to a very important neighbor of Africa, which is European Commission. I would like to ask the Excellency Mrs. Kadri Simpson, Commissioner for Energy for European Commission. Many thanks, Madam Commissioner, for all the support you give to IEA, to Africa for our work on Africa, and we will be very happy to hear your views. Europe's perspective, how the African energy sector develop. I am sure you will talk about the clean energy in the best way in Africa. The floor is yours, Madam Commissioner. Thank you.
So, dear Dr. Birol, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to frame this debate on sustainable recovery with my thoughts. We recently approved EU Recovery and Resilience Package, and we will support with that European Green Deal. This is Europe's economic strategy for the green and digital transition. 37% of the budget will be spent on investment to speed up transition to climate neutrality. At the same time, in Africa, the needs for investments are also considerable. And today, Africa only attracts 4% of global investments in energy and 2% of the world's investments in renewable energy. And this needs to change. Africa faces a dual challenge. It needs to address the economic impact of the COVID-19 crisis that delays investments in the energy sector, and it has to sustain and scale up its efforts to bridge the electricity and clean cooking access gap, as well as ensuring energy security to fit the continent's ambition of sustainable industrialization as foreseen in the African Union's Agenda 2063. The EU is a long-term partner to Africa, and sustainable energy is at the heart of our cooperation. In the past 7 years, we allocated 3 billion euros to help build sustainable energy systems and infrastructures on the continent. And since 2015, we also support the African Union to develop its African single electricity market, to contribute to energy security through the continent's integration. But aid will not be enough to bridge the investment gap. In 2020, we have set out to take our partnerships Africa to the next level. We work jointly to identify priorities. In the energy sector, it means the following concrete actions. Stepping up our offer of financial guarantees and instruments designed to encourage private sector investments in markets where perceived risk is often higher than the real. And the Green Energy Initiative to increase the share of renewable energy in Africa's energy mix and access to energy services for people and businesses. And last but not least, energy efficiency. It is really time to pay attention to energy efficiency. As rightly highlighted by the IEA's in its African scenario, with energy efficiency measures, Africa can limit to 50% its energy demand increase while multiplying its economy by 4. Any other scenario will lead to an endless race for energy with no winners. On 9th of December, our African Union and EU leaders will be meeting to discuss Africa's economic transformation and work on a comprehensive investment program in support of growth, jobs, and economic transformation. And let us prepare the ground today for the future discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. What I see in the last few months, or in fact, few months, I should say, how Africa and Europe, at least in the context of energy, working closely together and sharing experiences, preoccupations, and similar, I would say, if not the same, similar ambitions in terms of their future energy markets. Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner, for your valuable input. Now, can I move to another country which is working very closely with Africa, which is Japan? So I would like to acknowledge and ask His Excellency Eiichiro Washio, who is the State Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan. Mr. Minister, thank you very much. I know it is very late in Japan. Very kind of you that you are joining us. It highlights once again the importance Japan is attaching to Africa energy and hopefully to International Energy Agency. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. The floor is yours.
Abu Zaido.
His Excellency Dr. Abu Zaid, Commissioner for Infrastructure of Energy and Minerals of African Union, Dr. Biro, Executive Director of International Energy Agency, His Excellency Mr. Mantash, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources of South Africa, distinguished dignitaries of national governments as well as international organizations, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm Washio Eiichiro, State Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan. I'm delighted to be given this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Japanese government today. I would like to express my respect for IEA's daily efforts as well as the leadership demonstrated by Executive Director Biro. I would also like to thank the stakeholders for their efforts to realize today's forum. As a politician and State Minister for Foreign Affairs, when considering how to advance Japan's diplomacy, I believe hands-on approach reflecting views on the ground is important. From the viewpoint of hands-on approach, when we think about the energy situation in Africa, we face the realities that many people still do not have access to modern energy. Because of COVID-19 pandemic, we have recognized once again that stable energy supply and people's access to energy is crucial to store vaccines and medical supplies and operate medical facilities. However, as pointed out in the World Energy Outlook by the IEA, this year in sub-Saharan Africa, the number of people without access to power
So we lost the connection with Japan.
Next.
Yes, please.
I would like to talk about the importance to continue investment in Africa. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, the global economy is stagnating. As a result, there have been disruptions and delays in energy projects in Africa. This is a very concerning situation. According to the report of the IEA, energy producing countries are struggling to attract upstream investment. It also points out that it may take until 2040 for the crude oil production to recover to the level of 2019. If necessary investments are not made, it would make the future of Africa uncertain. It is also an important challenge for the future of energy security, including the realization of energy access. That is because investing in Africa means shaping the future of Africa as well as the future of our energy. With this awareness, Japan has been steadily implementing initiatives to realize early universal access to energy, such as promoting cooperation in Kenya, leveraging Japan's geothermal power generation technology. At the same time, through the Bilateral Committee on Improvement of Business Environment established with 7 African countries last year, we will continue to work towards improving countries' business and investment
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. We know how supportive the Japanese government is for the African countries, from energy to economy to social life and health. I thank you very much for your support for Africa and in general for the developing countries. Now, Netherlands, a country which is an active partner of many African countries in support of accelerating clean energy transitions. We are privileged to have the Vice Minister for International Cooperation, Mrs. Kitty van der Heyden. Madam Minister, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your support. We are looking forward to hear your perspectives. The floor is yours, Madam.
Thank you, Dr. Birol, and it's a real pleasure to be with you. And thank you also, Madam Abu Zaid. It's, as I did, this is an incredibly important topic for us. And let me just emphasize that, you know, the need for action on both issues, both climate change and COVID-19, it's urgent. And I very much appreciate that you, the IEA, convened on Africa's energy sector and the challenges exacerbated by the pandemic. Now, I'm going to be incredibly short. We're running out of time, so I'm going to make 3 points only, Dr. Birol. One is that we think that a resilient economic recovery can only be a green and inclusive recovery. There is no other way that a resilient economic recovery can happen. That was already the truth before the pandemic. It's exacerbated by the pandemic. Let's make sure that Africa avoids stranded assets and that we invest in renewable energy that are now often cheaper than the cheapest coal-fired power plants. But equally important for us is the issue of a just transition. It's not just an energy transition, it's about a just energy transition. And we have to look at solutions, how we find alternative job opportunities for those areas that do depend on a coal production. Let's think of South Africa. How do we find and unlock the opportunities, the employment opportunities of the green transition? Second point, I am deeply concerned, like you are, with the 585 million people in Africa that still have no access to energy, the 900 people that are without clean cooking solutions. So from my country, clean cooking, the SDG 7, access to energy will be our polar star. It's our guideline. Also, since the figures that we were just shown very clearly highlight that we're slowing down on progress. And in our energy access agenda, the Netherlands has promised we will deliver clean energy for 50 million people in 2030 with a focus on Africa. But here again, I just want to underline the importance of inclusiveness. And this was mentioned before, and I couldn't stress this enough. Gender equality, but also involving youth. It's about their future. In December, we'll launch the NDCP Youth Engagement Plan, written by an international youth task force. And youth from the We Are Tomorrow Global Partnership will strive for participation in climate dialogues and policy making in their respective countries. I think that's very important. Last point, just to encourage the step up talks on EU-Africa cooperation on clean energy. This is incredibly important. And let me reiterate again, the appreciation we had for the event you organized as IEA with Morocco on energy transition in North Africa. It is gratifying and truly wonderful to see how committed we both are to learn from each other, but also to work with each other. And that's the only way we're going to address both the global issues we're dealing with, climate change, and getting COVID-19 under control. Back to you, Dr. Birol, and thank you again. We'll be with you as your partner as we move forward for Africa and clean energy transition.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. All 3 points are very well appreciated, and another appreciation from my side, my personal side, is Netherlands is one of those countries who not only talks, but also walks, and is always there with the African countries to support them, not only in terms of discussions, meetings, but also by providing real assistance and support. Thank you very much for that, Madam Minister. So our last speaker is from Power Africa. We want to hear their views. And up to now, as I said in the beginning, in this meeting, we have about 20 countries representing 75% of the global, or the African energy consumption, and 16 of them are represented by the ministers. But we wanted to also hear some different voices such as Power Africa focusing on the electricity sector. So may I turn to my colleague, Mr. Mark Carotto, please. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Birol, Madam Commissioner, ministers, everyone. I very much appreciate and honored to participate today. Such an important topic. Obviously, I'll keep my remarks short, though there's so much to be said. For those of you who don't know, and I hope 7 years in, that's very few of you, Power Africa is a US government-led partnership. It includes 12 US government agencies, 19 development partners, and over 150 private sector companies with the goal of doubling access to electricity, specifically to get 30,000 megawatts and 60 million connections, 30 million of which we think will be off grid. So I really am heartened by some of the remarks today, especially Dr. Ibrahim on looking at how important things like mini grids are going to be. You know, but today we're going to talk just briefly about data, because I think when you talk about data, you think about IEA and how critical data really is. A simple story. You know, we did some work with the Tony Blair Institute on cross-border trade in West Africa. And we based that on the work we did in East Africa, where we saw a very significant potential savings of $6 billion to increase energy trade. So we had an expectation. We went in doing the data, actually doing the research before we started. We learned that there's probably upwards of a $35 billion savings on the West Africa side. Huge, right? A simple story just to show that without doing some data, some research, we would have potentially missed this big opportunity. And now we advocate for this strong intervention that will fundamentally change our regional priorities. Same thing with COVID. So now we're looking at COVID response and recovery, and I've heard a lot of great comments on, you know, investment is scarce. We need to be targeted. There's a lot of understanding and misunderstanding, quite frankly, at this point on how to best both recover and respond to COVID. So right back to the data. We're going to commit ourselves to make sure we use data to take our path forward in mobilizing both ourselves and US government resources, but also all of our partners, and as much as we're a platform. So the challenges of collecting and validating and analyzing and applying high quality data sets are obvious. I think I'm speaking to the crowd here, but we need to make sure we use good data to identify those access deficits to have an efficient, effective, and timely response, right? So we continue to work in our three main areas, which are with the utilities per COVID, which are with helping government stabilize the utilities, helping to mitigate the impacts on the off-grid sector as a whole, and looking at healthcare electrification. And as I said, data hopefully will drive those decisions to be the most efficient and effective as possible. You know, we've seen a lot of examples of things that are happening, global supply streams being disrupted, people having difficulty importing equipment, customers' diminished ability to pay, of course, a drop in industrial customers in a lot of spots, people trying to rejigger how to make sure the utilities stay financially solvent and account for cash flow losses. We're not all of us going to be able to completely directly hit all of these at one time, but our work with Kenya Power in the past has really shown us how critical data is. You know, we've helped them understand where to deploy their inspection teams on their substations. Small but critical part of them functioning more efficiently. How people are tampering with their meters and how they try to bypass them. Real small data points, but again, data that shows what we need to do to make sure they go forward. All said, but of a quick example, they dropped from 35 to 31% losses in the last year, backed on a very data-driven approach on how to get to a very small idea through a big picture of good information. And now it's COVID's turn, right? We're going to use sophisticated GIS analysis to map our solar home system distribution areas. We're already seeing this in Nigeria. We're able to work with minimizing the travel times for people to make sure that they had less of a chance to potentially be infected. And through that, we've been able to target our solar home distribution systems to vulnerable households, essential workers, and gender-based violence centers in particular for one program. But the minimized travel time is key here. So with that, I really, and I appreciate the time, wanted to make an announcement today. And we're very excited, Dr. Birol, as you know, to partner with you, to continue partnering with you. It's been a long-term partnership, but we want to announce another $1.5 million grant to the IEA. We designed this with you, as you know, for a while, long before the pandemic was on the horizon. But boy, was that prescient that we decided to partner with you yet again and to bring our forces together to use the backs of your tremendous expertise. You guys, as you know, are a global trusted leader in data analysis. You're a valued convener, as today is so obviously showing. And your objective expert source of policy recommendation is one that we rely on, and I know the world does. So we thank you for that. We're pleased to be working with you again, and we look forward to the next chapter. And with that, I will conclude. And just again, say thanks to all of our partners, but in particular today to IEA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carotto, and this is great to work together. We are looking forward to see your engagement in Africa will be even stronger in the next months and years to come. With great attention, we are going to follow your work. Now, dear colleagues, we understood from this session that Africa is badly hit by COVID, especially the power sector, but the fundamentals are there. Very cheap solar energy, demand is very strong, and at the same time, there is a hidden appetite for investment, but we have to find ways to convince the investors to de-risk those investments. And here, there is a role for the domestic governments to move, and at the same time, the international organizations, some of them are mentioned, and also different donors and bilateral engagement with different countries around the world. So with this, may I now turn to the next chair of our meeting, talking about exactly financing and investment gap. The next chair is the Minister of Petroleum and Energy of Senegal, the Excellency Mrs. Sophia Gladima. Madam Minister, thank you very much for agreeing to chair this session, even though you just started, you just took over your new job, a very important job. Thank you very much for chairing this session, Madam Minister. The floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur Burol. Madame la commissaire des infrastructures et de l'énergie de l'Union africaine, Monsieur Burol, directeur exécutif, honorable ministre de l'Afrique du Sud, chers participants, bonjour à tous et à tous. Effectivement, heureuse de participer à cette rencontre sur l'avenir énergétique de l'Afrique au lendemain de la COVID. Comme nouvelle ministre, comme vous venez de dire, Monsieur Burol, effectivement, le Sénégal a eu le plaisir de co-présider avec l'AIE un sommet sur l'impact de la COVID sur le secteur énergétique en juin dernier et a participé également au sommet mondial sur la transition énergétique en rapport avec la COVID en juillet, toujours organisé par l'AIE. D'où l'intérêt du sujet sur l'après-COVID. Revenir effectivement sur l'impact de la COVID qui a ralenti beaucoup de projets à travers le monde et essentiellement au Sénégal, mais également voir comment combler le déficit de financement et d'investissement, quelles seraient les priorités, les innovations et modalités d'une coopération multilatérale renforcée. Oui, certains progrès enregistrés au Sénégal, malgré cette COVID, à savoir la continuité du service et des projets, malgré la fermeture des frontières, un bon enregistré en termes d'électrification rurale, dont le taux d'accès est passé de 43,2% en fin 2018 à 53,9% en fin 2019, avec 4325 localités électrifiées. L'augmentation de la part des énergies renouvelables dans le mix énergétique qui vont atteindre 30% en fin 2020, où on fait un mix entre le solaire, l'éolien et l'hydraulique. Et l'amélioration de l'éclairage public avec la pose de près de 40 000 lampadaires solaires, et nous pensons pouvoir aller en 2021 à 100 000 lampadaires. Mais pour cela, nous avons besoin de mobiliser des financements conséquents et nous remercions la dernière intervention tout à l'heure qui annonce des financements pour le secteur de l'énergie. Et pour faire face à cette crise, renforcer ce secteur donc pour produire une énergie propre et durable, capable de faire face à des chocs exogènes comme la COVID qui a surpris tout le monde. Mais également, au niveau des hydrocarbures, le Sénégal a, en parfaite coopération avec la République mauritanienne, lancé le développement d'un champ gazier qu'on appelle la Grande Tortue Almeïne en 2018. Donc, ce sera une production commune qui commence à partir de 2023. Des initiatives similaires sont en route pour plus de production de gaz naturel pour le marché sénégalais, mais aussi pour les pays de la sous-région. Cela devrait permettre de basculer notre production électrique au gaz, ce qui est favorable aussi bien pour nos finances, mais aussi pour notre planète par rapport aux défis des changements climatiques. Mais comme je le disais tout à l'heure, tout ceci va nécessiter naturellement des efforts financiers importants. C'est de cela que nous allons débattre maintenant dans cette deuxième session. Alors, donc, je pense que chaque orateur aura maximum 2 à 3 minutes pour faire vite. Et donc, il y a une minuterie, je pense, sur vos écrans qui vous indiquera le temps écoulé. Et pour cela, donc, je passe pour les propos liminaires de la session à son Excellence, M. Donald Jean-Claude Oussou, ministre de l'Énergie du Bénin. Monsieur Oussou, vous avez la parole.
Merci, chers collègues. Bonjour à tous. Bonjour à la commissaire donc, de l'Union africaine, monsieur le directeur exécutif de l'AIE, cher ami, monsieur Biro, madame Sophie Gladima, merci pour votre intervention et merci à tous les organisateurs et à tous les participants ici présents. Une salutation particulière au docteur Ibrahim Bo pour tout ce qu'il fait dans le cadre donc, du développement de notre continent. La situation de COVID-19, comme nous l'avions déjà abordé, je crois, dans une précédente session organisée par l'AIE et le Sénégal, comme l'a rappelé ma collègue tantôt, nous a permis de brosser un peu tous les contours de la situation et faire le constat de la réalité dans nos différents pays, les difficultés que nous rencontrons et évidemment quelles sont les différentes mesures possibles pour pouvoir améliorer les choses. Mais ce que je peux déjà dire, c'est que la situation de COVID-19 nous rappelle plus que jamais l'obligation, je dirais, de développer, de fiabiliser et de viabiliser le secteur de l'énergie, puisque c'est le socle du développement socio-économique de tout pays, pour une meilleure résilience de nos économies, avec une meilleure capacité, je dirais, à faire face à des situations aussi surprenantes et difficiles telles que celle de la COVID-19. Et Dieu sait qu'il pourra en avoir d'autres. Et pour mieux faire face à cela, il faut qu'on soit bien armé et qu'on ait une solidité, je dirais, des fondamentaux. Et la disponibilité énergétique fait partie de ces éléments fondamentaux. Si je reviens au Bénin, notre histoire, c'est que à l'avènement du nouveau gouvernement en 2016, nous étions face à une situation récurrente de crise énergétique à travers, je dirais, des délestages de long terme avec des coupures à n'en plus finir et surtout plus de 95% de notre énergie électrique était importée de l'étranger. Et enfin, ce qui est fondamental, c'est-à-dire qu'on avait un défaut dans le cadre réglementaire qui n'était pas forcément attractif, qui n'était pas de manière à attirer et sécuriser les investisseurs privés. Donc, à partir de là, il y a une volonté, je dirais, publique, une volonté gouvernementale, notamment du président Patrice Talon, pour faire en sorte que ce secteur devienne une priorité du programme d'action du gouvernement avec 4 projets phares qui sont, premièrement, comment moderniser et étendre la production en énergie électrique locale. Deuxièmement, développer les énergies renouvelables parce qu'on ne peut pas être dans un pays où on a le soleil à foison et lui tourner le dos. Troisièmement, on devrait revoir, restructurer notre Société nationale d'énergie électrique, de distribution, qui était en difficulté à la fois financière, mais aussi à la fois de gouvernance. Et enfin, l'efficacité énergétique et son contrôle doivent être donc une réalité parce qu'on ne peut pas rendre disponible cette énergie électrique et la gaspiller. Donc, ce qu'on a vu qui était prioritaire, c'est d'abord et avant tout mettre en place des réformes conséquentes qui sont pour nous incontournables pour attirer des promoteurs, des investisseurs et surtout privés. C'est pour cela que très rapidement, nous avons mis en place un certain nombre de réformes, en commençant par la loi sur le partenariat public-privé, loi PPP, sur le code d'électricité, puisque le précédent code avait plus de 15 ans et ne répondait plus aux enjeux actuels et de demain. Évidemment, les énergies renouvelables ont fait l'objet d'un code particulier en attendant le code de l'électricité qui intègre cette dimension importante pour nous. Nous avions généralisé les compteurs prépayés dans l'administration, dans le public, pour faire en sorte que la partie financière de la société de distribution soit améliorée. Ce qui a amené également le gouvernement à établir un nouveau plan tarifaire pour mieux viabiliser ce secteur. Mais également, ce qu'il faut noter, c'est que nous avons mis en place des actions pour encourager la prise en compte du genre pour le développement, parce qu'on ne doit laisser personne de côté pour cet engagement de développement que nous avons. Et évidemment aussi, le développement des compétences, parce que je dis toujours que la pérennisation de nos actions dépend des hommes et des femmes de qualité que nous mettons sur nos projets. Par rapport à toutes ces réformes, en l'espace de 3 ans, nous avons obtenu donc un taux, je dirais, d'autonomie, de disponibilité énergétique, électrique, qui est passé de près de 0 à 60% sur la production nationale, avec une centrale de 127 MW qui a été construite en dual fuel et opérationnelle depuis l'année dernière. Nous avons réhabilité les anciennes centrales et tout ça nous permet aujourd'hui d'emprunter le chemin, je dirais, de l'autonomie énergétique, en tout cas ce qui concerne l'électricité. Puisque en 2016, nous avions sur notre territoire 180 MW de location des machines pour produire l'électricité. Fin 2019, il n'y a plus au Bénin un moyen de location pour produire de l'électricité, ce qui montre que le chemin que nous avions emprunté est le bon. Le nombre de clients, par exemple, de notre Société nationale d'électricité a augmenté de 25% en l'espace de 3 ans. Le délai moyen de coupure, qui était de plus de 75 heures en 2016, est passé aujourd'hui à moins de 13 heures. Le temps moyen pour dépanner est passé de près de 11 heures à moins de 2 heures aujourd'hui. Et puis, le taux d'électrification a augmenté de près de 10%. Mais également, nous avons travaillé sur les pertes en énergie, puisqu'il y a les pertes commerciales, mais il y a aussi les pertes techniques. Et là, il y a un gain important à gagner par rapport à la lutte pour la disponibilité de l'électricité. Mais également, tout ce qui concerne l'efficacité énergétique, nous sommes passés au LED. Nous avons une grande disposition pour passer l'éclairage public en LED, et ça continue et ça nous permet de réduire considérablement donc nos consommations. Ce qu'il faut noter, et j'ai bientôt fini s'il vous plaît, c'est que la semaine dernière, nous avons lancé la construction d'une première centrale solaire de 25 MW et il y en a 6 autres qui vont succéder pour nous permettre d'obtenir fin 2022 un taux de 30% de notre mix énergétique qui sera d'origine solaire. Et puis derrière, nous avons pris la politique, et c'est historique au Bénin, la politique nationale de développement des énergies renouvelables pour nous orienter sur les 10 prochaines années. Et enfin, nous avons lancé un projet de FSRU, donc d'une unité flottante de stockage et de regazéification avec le groupe Total pour rendre disponible le gaz pour une meilleure production. Donc, ce que je peux dire, c'est que nos pays ont besoin, nos populations ont besoin de cette énergie et nos populations n'ont pas beaucoup le temps d'attendre et c'est à nous que revient je dirais, le devoir de faire en sorte que les choses s'améliorent. Je vous remercie.
Merci, chers collègues. Donc, nous vous souhaitons beaucoup de chance par rapport à toutes ces réformes que vous avez entreprises et qui donnent déjà des résultats. Donc, je vais demander que quand même les gens soient un peu plus brefs parce qu'on avait demandé 2 à 3 minutes. Là, je me retrouve avec 6 minutes. Et on me demande également de faire intervenir le ministre de l'Environnement et de l'Action climatique du Portugal, M. Fernandes. Monsieur Fernandez, vous avez la parole, parce qu'il devait intervenir lors de la première session.
Your Excellencies, chers collègues, it's a great pleasure to be in the second Ministerial Forum on Africa, discussing its current energy trends, but also aiming to analyze the opportunities that African countries can have in this new area. COVID-19 crisis put in even more evidence the existing gaps on energy access for all in Africa, especially affecting the poorest and the most vulnerable energy consumers. But the impact of this crisis went even further, affecting the oil and gas industries and the consequent impact in the global markets. This brings relevant social and economic consequences, especially in countries that have economics depending 90% or more on fossil fuel. But this crisis is important to build back better. Africa is a key driver of global energy demand growth, rich in solar power and minerals that will be vital for clean energy transition worldwide. Therefore, it is fundamental to congregate efforts to push for the energy transition in African countries. The recently launched IEA 2020 Renewables Report shows that renewable will overtake coal to become the largest source of electricity generation in 2025. African countries must take this opportunity to transform their energy system and invest in low-carbon solutions. We are ready to work with African countries on this transition. Only with strong partnerships locally, nationally, and regionally, but also with private sector, industry, and financial institutions, will be possible to take full profit on these opportunities. As you may be aware, Portugal has been one of the front runners in pushing for carbon neutrality in 2050. Our bet on renewables, particularly solar, is well known worldwide, and more recently we have started to design our national strategy for hydrogen, which we believe will have a strong role to play in our decarbonization process. We are ready to work with other countries on this, as well as to exchange knowledge and experiences. This reflects our conviction that the diversification of energy sources is crucial for any country's security of supply, as well as to assure the best use of each of the energy sources where it is more profitable. I do believe Africa has all the conditions to start looking further on this diversification of energy sources and to accelerate their investment on renewables. Portugal will assume in the 1st September of 2021 the presidency of the Council of the European Union. One of our priorities for these 6 months will be to foster the relations between EU and Africa. Africa is Europe's closest neighbor, and the ties linking the two regions are a result of history, proximity, and shared interests. Therefore, the new strategy with Africa will be a relevant instrument for the next coming years, having a partnership for green transition and energy access on its heart. Do count on Portugal to push for a stronger cooperation between the European Union and Africa, allowing the best balanced economy recovery for the well-being of African populations, but aiming for a gradual energy transition towards a low-carbon, resource-efficient, and climate-resilient future. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Merci également pour les opportunités qui sont offertes par le Portugal pour échanger la connaissance, mais également l'appel pour la transition énergétique. Alors, sans plus tarder, je vais donner la parole au député de Sierra Leone et l'ancien PDG de l'initiative C4All. Monsieur Yunkela.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Thank you to the organizers, Commissioner of the African Union, and Fatih Birol for asking me to make a few comments here. We have the remaining 10 years to go to 2030, an important decade for energy transitions to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 7. Unfortunately, given the news we heard this morning from the presentations by Fatih Birol and our good friend Laura Kodzi, we already know that investments are dropping off by 30% in the energy sector. And of course, because of the deepening poverty as a result of COVID, that affordability and ability to pay is becoming an issue. This session is supposed to address finance and also international collaboration. What we know, number one, is that for finance to come in, for real investments to come in at the scale we want, large-scale investments for real energy transformation, we need proper regulations. It is clear from every work we've done that a good regulatory market, a superb set of public policies that are sustainable and predictable will attract the bigger investments we want. So regulations matter. The second one is international collaboration. The amount of financing we need, over 50 billion a year just for energy access in Africa. By the time you add maintenance costs, you're looking at maybe 60, 70 billion a year if we are to catch up. To get that amount of money coming in, we need international collaboration to help de-risk investments coming in, but also to help create proper energy markets. So I'll mention to you some initiatives. The African Union and the European Union, with the support of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and the Friends of Europe, have already established a new public-private partnership that will be looking at sustainable energy investments. That will be kicked off in 2 weeks, and hopefully will go to the African Union, European Union Heads of State Summit. But one of the platforms is on energy investments. There is agriculture, there is digitalization, but a solid component is on energy investments and energy cooperation. I have the privilege that I'll be co-chairing that entity together with Connie Hedegaard, former Commissioner for Climate for the EU, but of course supported by the African Union, Madame Abu Zaid, and also the Commissioner for Energy of the European Union. We need that collaboration. We need a lot of international cooperation to deal with the institutional problems we have, to deal with the regulatory problems we have, and also the capacity building we need along the value chain of all kinds of energy systems. A second effort, which I know our colleague Raj Shah will be talking about, is the Commission to End Energy Poverty, which has a lot of African regulators, but Raj Shah will talk about that. I mentioned these two because in both situations, we've identified the need for establishing an African school of regulators. If we don't have the right regulations, investments will not flow in. So it is our hope. We've gotten some initial financial commitments that we work with the Association of African Regulators to see how we can build their capacities to create the kinds of energy markets that will make energy trade possible, that will make bigger investments come in, but also the right public-private partnerships we need. The second effort is one on clean cooking. And indeed, if you look at the background note given to us by the International Energy Agency, 900 million Africans do not have access to clean cooking solutions. This is a silent tsunami, 500,000 premature deaths. In the context of COVID, that means we already have pre-existing problems. A lot of women with pulmonary problems because of household air pollution. Yeah, 500,000 premature deaths. And a lot of that indoor air pollution is caused by what? Charcoal and firewood. The good news today that we heard from the IEA is that because of oil prices going down, LPG is becoming cheap. And the minister from Senegal, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, they know they have done very well in Africa on LPG, but we see countries like Rwanda, Kenya, and Uganda, Tanzania, all moving in to provide clean cooking solutions. We hope that this will move faster, and to accelerate it, we have a new platform that is hosted by the WHO, that is supported by the World Bank, UNDP, and many other institutions, is the Health and Energy Platform for Action, where we're targeting investments coming in, capacity building to deal with the clean cooking problem. I raise this here because in a lot of our countries, most ministers of energy are not prioritizing this. So finally, we want clean cooking treated at the same level as electrification. It is the second largest cause of morbidity in Africa today. So if we want to enhance economic growth and also gender empowerment, we must address clean cooking. Finally, we hope that if we're looking at energy transitions towards a greener growth, remember, most of the metals you need, cobalt, manganese, and the platinum group that you need for that global energy transition are in Africa. Over 50% of the cobalt and significant amounts of the manganese we have. 70% of the platinum group is in Southern Africa. The world cannot transition effectively into the new energy systems and battery systems without Africa. But Africa needs to begin to produce those components in Africa. So Power Africa, ask Elon Musk to come to Africa and establish his first major battery plant. We need those skills, but we need those investments, not just to sell the raw materials. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Pour l'annonce pour cette école africaine pour la réglementation, parce qu'effectivement, comme vous le dites, nous avons besoin de cette réglementation et des institutions et d'un renforcement de capacité pour pouvoir aller vers cette transit énergétique. Donc, également pour l'appel pour que l'Afrique, qui est la source des substances qui permettent d'avoir ces énergies propres, également puisse en bénéficier. Donc, je vais donner la parole à M. Shah, président de la Fondation Rockefeller. Monsieur Shah, Monsieur Rajesh Shah.
Great. Thank you, Your Excellencies, friends and colleagues. Minister Gladima, congratulations on your leadership and commitment to 100% electrification and recent adoption of the integrated distribution framework to achieve that objective. I'll just step back and point out that given the COVID-19 crisis and the economic consequence of it, industrial nations have been able to commit 25 to 30% of their gross domestic product as part of a green recovery in their nations. Emerging markets have been closer to 6%, and African nations across the board have been closer to 2%. That is deeply insufficient in order to really climb out of this economic crisis in a manner that allows nations to build a better and more modern and more inclusive infrastructure for the economic future. In Africa, we believe energy infrastructure in particular ought to be the top priority for investment with respect to an effort to produce an economic recovery and a green recovery. And that's why the Rockefeller Foundation had sponsored, as Kande Yamkula just noted, a commission on ending energy poverty that explored with scientists, investors, the heads of financial institutions, and global and political leaders. It explored what it would take to recover from this crisis with an inclusion so that everyone had access to productive power, not just the kind of electricity that allows home consumption to improve, but actually productive power that enables businesses and job creation to be more rapid. And our conclusion was that with the right kind of public and private partnership, with nations making commitments to create integrated distribution frameworks that allowed African utilities to continue to do their work, but also created opportunities for a much expanded distributed renewable energy sector, that the technology now exists: solar panels, batteries, smart meters, artificial intelligence-based and remote monitoring and operations. The technology now exists to actually achieve universal electrification in an economically viable and profitable manner. But to take advantage of that opportunity, which in many nations may mean that 40 or 50% of all household connections and village connections come from distributed renewable energy, solar mini grids that are not part initially of the formal state-sponsored large-scale distribution and transmission network. The companies and the joint ventures and the partners that would pursue those distributed renewable strategies need the policy space, the government support, and in some cases, a modest results-based capital cost subsidy to launch those efforts. We've seen in our work in India in particular that we are able to build out 10,000 of these low-cost mini grids, solar mini grids, reach 10 million people, and do it at a target price point of 15 cents a kilowatt hour over the coming years. Africa's price point will be higher, but nevertheless, it is the best buy that you can offer a rural community member in terms of access to productive power in a reasonable time frame and at a low cost alongside commercial partners that can bear the brunt of most of the financing and investment. This effort is something the Rockefeller Foundation is committing $1 billion to over the coming years, and we hope to work with you to expand the distributed renewable energy sector in Africa to adopt renewables that can slow the threat of climate change and to take advantage of this COVID-19 economic crisis as a moment when we can reimagine an infrastructure of the future that, much like the mobile phone industry 10 or 15 years ago, and I see my friend Mo Ibrahim in this session, has the potential to 10 years from now create a much more modern, much more advanced, and much more inclusive economic infrastructure for the continent. Thank you.
Merci pour cette belle annonce de 1 milliard pour amener au moins 10 000 mini-réseaux de au moins 5 kWh. Vous l'avez dit, l'énergie et infrastructure pour une base de développement et l'inclusion pour l'accès à l'énergie, surtout l'énergie renouvelable. Alors, je vais prendre une liste des gens qui vont lever la main. J'ai déjà vu que la Norvège a levé la main. Donc, après 3 ou 4 interventions, je passerai la parole à M. Ogumbi qui voulait également se retirer. Donc, je passe la parole à la Norvège, ministre norvégien. Norvège, on ne vous entend pas. Il y a un problème de son, on ne vous entend pas? Norvège. Quelqu'un d'autre veut prendre la parole en attendant? Comment il s'appelle Norvège? Danemark. À Danemark, vous avez la parole en attendant que la Norvège nous revienne.
Well, thank you very much, and Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished colleagues. Well, I'm not Norway, but I'm very close to our Norwegian friend. I think this is a great honor for us, a great honor for me to discuss or to present at this forum for the second time. I was pleased to be in Ethiopia last year for the conference. I think, as was mentioned by many of the other speakers, I mean, the crisis we're currently facing has really put a lot of pressure on many things and that really have led the world in a wrong way in many areas. For instance, as just mentioned, this whole access to energy, I mean, you could see the numbers in the World Energy Outlook that this has really been reversed. The trend that was actually going quite well, we really need to reverse that back and to get that back on track. And it was also mentioned, I think it's really important that we are now focusing on building back better and greener. And I think together with Norway, Sweden, and Finland, as the Nordic countries, this is a pledge that has made at the Prime Minister's level that this is something that we really want to work on and stride toward the global scene. And I think the good news for that is that, I mean, green is actually cheaper in many ways. And as was just mentioned, I mean, we can reinvent a lot of things and actually do it in a green and much more inclusive way. And I think we actually see from our Danish perspective 3 main priorities. One was mentioned much more elegantly than I could, that we really need to focus on regulation and get the regulation right. I think that point has already been made, so I'm not going to push that. The second one is I think we really need to see the full potential of our multilateral development banks. I mean, is really the place where we can unlock a lot of private capital at scale to really push the boundary and provide countries both with money, but also with technical expertise in order to get much more ambitious NDC. So I think that's really a key thing. Thirdly, I think we really need to be sort of innovative in the way we mobilize private capital. We have seen from our Danish perspective, the Danish pension funds are actually now very much engaged and very pleased in investing in green investment around the globe. We need much more of those moving in. So I think that was one of the reasons why we've been very active supporting the climate investment platform, which I think is one of the key ways to move forward in this, to really try to close the investment gap. So I think if we manage that, I think we can see green investment at scale, given that this is actually a much cheaper and better version. So thank you very much for giving me the floor. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Christensen. Vous avez pris la place de la Norvège, donc vous les avez poussés de l'autre côté pour que les banques multinationales puissent venir avant les banques norvégiennes. Merci pour cet appel, surtout par rapport à l'innovation pour la mobilisation des capitaux privés, parce qu'effectivement, nous n'avons pas le choix. Il faudrait qu'aujourd'hui, qu'il y ait un partenariat public-privé, mais également, il faudrait peut-être aussi voir les taux de remboursement, parce que c'est souvent ça le problème. Alors, si M. Jacobson est prêt, je vais lui donner la parole. Bon, sinon, je donne la parole au ministre italien.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm really thankful and honored to represent Italy in today's International Energy Agency African Union Commission Ministerial Forum. Let me first express my appreciation to His Excellency Amani Abu Zaid, Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy of the African Union, and to Dr. Fatih Birol, Executive Director, for their commitment to the success of such a significant event to accelerate, steer, and support Africa's way forward. Italy is partner to the UK in the COP26. Italy will host the pre-COP and the event Youth for Climate Driving Ambition, which will give a sound voice to the young generations whose opinions will then be presented to the leaders in Glasgow. Moreover, Italy will host in autumn 21st an Encounters with Africa outreach event on climate and environmental issues, which will be an ideal bridge between the COP26 and the next COP27 under African presidency. Italy will also have the G20 presidency next year. The 3P, people, planet, and prosperity, are the three pivotal topics that we have chosen. The nexus between energy and climate is at the center of our work. Smart energy cities, innovative energy technologies, sustainable investments, stimulus post-COVID, eradication of energy poverty, but also energy security and the renewed climate ambition towards a carbon neutral economy are just a sample of what we will be discussing. It goes without saying that all of those topics are indeed very pertinent to Africa's energy future in the post-pandemic scenario. I'm sure that if we join hands, we can make of the Italian G20 a success story for Africa. And I hereby rely in particular on the South African minister as an utmost important partner in G20, in the G20 family. And of course, on the International Energy Agency for the contribution that it could give to the discussions. And it has been widely discussed, Africa is affected by the energy paradox of scarcity in plenty. On the one hand, there are in the sub-Saharan Africa around 600 million people without access to electricity. On the other hand, the continent has an enormous quantity of resources. Another critical feature is that Africa's energy sector is currently dealing with the impact of COVID-19 and the consequent global economic recession, as it has been underlined by the agency recent reports. Time is ripe for countries and governments to speed up their efforts and collaboration to ensure long-term energy planning, public and private funding, and adequate political and fiscal incentives to rebuild resilient, solid, fair, and sustainable economies in the post-COVID-19 scenario. It's very clear that affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern clean energy is the most impactful and effective solution to reach all people in the continent. renewable energy, efficiency measures, and modern electricity grids are the main drivers to fight energy poverty, empower local communities, create added and distributed value for the economy, generate skilled job opportunities, secure food and water, and thus fostering socioeconomic growth while containing greenhouse gases emission. In this perspective, Italy has financed a very important project of the agency for smart grids and digitalization, and we come to have a special attention also to Africa as per its implementation. Moreover, in the next future, hydrogen can play a critical role, especially if coupled with renewable plants in Africa. Hydrogen is enjoying an unprecedented momentum across the world. The stimulus packages adopted for the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis can be a useful instrument to support the use of hydrogen, especially in the sectors such as heavy transports and industry. Considering the enormous Africa's potential for renewable energies production, the African continent can become Europe's privileged partner in green hydrogen production and exchange. Equally important are other new technologies such as marine and ocean energy, advanced biofuels, and the waste-to-fuel solutions, which can be particularly important to foster the circular economy in Africa and to cope with waste disposal. Our governments should encourage private sector's investments on sustainable energy solutions as well as capacity building programs. Africa's futures belong to the young generations. Let me remind on this subject the Open Africa Power Program created by Enel Foundation and supported from the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, which consists of a series of training courses in African universities with the aim of creating a new generation of leaders personally involved in the realization of a clean energy future in their countries. The energy sector offers extraordinary opportunities for private investors to achieve at the same time energy security, environmental sustainability, and socioeconomic growth. Italy is in effect a door in this regard, as our energy companies are already engaged all over the continent in a wide array of technologies. Nevertheless, to boost investments, it is imperative to improve policies, guarantees, and regulatory framework. In other words, sustainable investments must be supported and facilitated by central and local governments, through the adoption of highest standards to establish a predictable business environment for investors. Broadly speaking, Italy is an active waiver of long-lasting relationships, already committed to realize infrastructures to link Europe and Africa, and involved in many fora of energy concerning Africa. For all this reason, Italy has always supported the association. I know I'm running out of time, so I will just greet you again. And let me remind just in closing that Italy co-chaired with His Excellency Abu Zaid the side event on Africa of last year. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup et nous souhaitons bonne chance pour la COP21 et nous pensons, comme vous l'avez si bien dit, qu'il sera autour de l'économie neutre qui sera pour l'avenir de l'Afrique. Et également penser à la jeune génération qui est l'avenir du monde à travers ces formations que vous proposez. Donc, sans plus tarder, je vais laisser la vidéo, parce qu'il y a une vidéo qui nous est proposée, et puis après la vidéo, je laisserai la parole à M. Ogumbiyi, le PDG de SIG for All. Madame, excusez-moi. On peut avoir la vidéo?
Thank you for that introduction and the opportunity to address you virtually. I want to thank the IEA, the African Union Commission, and the Republic of South Africa for today's forum. Your Excellencies, ministers, commissioners, esteemed guests, colleagues and friends. You know, since I spoke at last year's conference in Ethiopia, COVID-19 has truly transformed our landscape. According to the IEA, global energy investment this year is expected to decline by 18% and by more than 31% in Africa alone. But as we emerge from the pandemic, a brighter future awaits us if we embrace innovation over regulation. Here's what I mean. To make our environment cleaner, some people would have us regulate every fuel except renewables out of existence. But let's be clear. With renewables alone, it would be impossible to generate the reliable, affordable, life-sustaining electricity Africa needs to thrive and to prosper. It would be impossible for the United States Department of Energy to share its technologies across the continent through Power Africa. But if we choose innovation, we're not limited to only renewables. We can use every fuel we have and still improve our environment. And in the United States, we're doing exactly that. We're generating more zero emissions, renewables, and nuclear energy. We're producing record amounts of low emissions natural gas. We're making coal cleaner than ever before. And we're leading the world in reducing energy-related carbon emissions. And we are delighted to help Africa do likewise as we build on our partnership at today's forum. Thank you, and I hope you have a successful forum.
Pour le soutien par rapport à la réduction des émissions de gaz à carbone, effectivement, l'énergie propre simplement ne devrait pas permettre le développement de l'Afrique avec la technologie. Vous avez raison, c'est coupler les énergies, c'est faire le mix énergie entre les énergies fossiles et les énergies renouvelables. Alors, je vais laisser la parole à M. Kariuki, le vice-président de l'énergie de la BAD.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I'm the Vice President of the African Development Bank. I just thought I will share a few ideas, especially with regard to reduce ways for increasing investments. I think one of the colleagues did mention that the issue of creating enabling environment is important. And therefore, I will just reiterate this for emphasis. In particular, predictable regulatory environment is acknowledged as a critical factor in determining the success of investments, as evidenced by the fact that countries that have attracted the most private investment in the power sector are characterized by effective regulatory environments. So it is for this reason that the African Development Bank launched the Electricity Regulatory Index in 2018, and this benchmarks electricity sector regulation of participating countries against international best practice. The other item that I think is very, very important here is the sustainability of the power sectors. To date, we know that most of our utilities are saddled with huge debts, ranging from as low as $200 million to as high as $25 billion. This cannot be sustainable. Yet we know that cash flow sustainability or creditworthiness of our off-takers is an absolute imperative for investment in power, in the power sector. As we have heard from the earlier presentation, COVID-19 has only exacerbated the situation. However, I do believe that the solution is there, and the solution is to apply cost-reflective tariffs. Egypt has already demonstrated this can be done, even during COVID. In my view, a third challenge that must be important for addressing the issue of investments in Africa is the limited capacity we have in Africa. This relates to two aspects, the first one of which is the capacity of governments and associated utilities to timely structure bankable projects. And secondly, from a capital markets perspective, we know that Africa's capital markets is largely underdeveloped, except maybe for South Africa, as a result of which they are illiquid and fragmented, and which are characterized by high interest rates, which discourages investments. And probably this is the reason for the increase in solar power PV cost stated by the IEA. So the other question I wanted to address is how we can utilize, we can maximize our energy resources to propel economic growth and recovery in the light of the market uncertainty created by the pandemic. The first one, and I think the most compelling, is that Africa must leverage on the declining cost of renewables, especially solar and wind, whose respective potentials are estimated at 10 trillion terawatts and 110 gigawatts, and harness these indigenous sources for the development of Africa. However, as was mentioned by somebody, due to the inherent intermittence, development will also require sources of flexible generation such as gas. This way, we will insulate and build resilience into our power sectors, thereby precluding supply chain disruptions, as was evidenced during COVID-19. In this regard, I would like to report that the African Development Bank, whose renewable investments was a mere 9% during the 2001 to 2010, has actually increased its investments in renewable energies to 70% during the period 2011 to 2019. Secondly, and I think I'll stop here because of the time constraint, cognizant that many of our economies are inherently small, regional integration will be key to optimizing the utilization of Africa's resources. Regional power infrastructure based on renewable sources, for example, including the Grand Inga, the Batoka, or the Baines hydropower project, as well as geothermal projects, must therefore be developed to facilitate development of larger projects that benefit from economies of scale, therefore provide more competitive tariffs and whose output can be shared at a power pool level, bridging power deficit in countries with shortages. This, I note, I observe, is consistent with AU's Agenda 63, which I'm just concluding, which emphasizes the need for integration with notably development of regional and power continental pools, in which the African Development Bank, along with the EC, is providing critical support in the development of Africa's continental power master plan. I thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour cette piste par rapport à ces pôles énergétiques pour optimiser et utiliser les énergies renouvelables en mix avec les énergies fossiles. Alors, il ne reste que 8 minutes pour la fin de cette session. J'invite M. Ibrahim, le conseiller du ministre de l'Énergie du Nigeria. M. Hassan Ibrahim. On n'entend pas. M. Ibrahim du Nigeria.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Gladima, honorable ministers, Your Excellencies, and other distinguished participants. I'd like to just take this opportunity to once again, on behalf of the Honorable Minister of Power of Nigeria, Engineer Saleh Mamman, to extend his sincere apologies once again for not making it here in person, and also to extend a few words of goodwill and share a word or two on some of the initiatives going on here in Nigeria. And once again to congratulate Dr. Birol, His Excellency Dr. Abu Zaid, and His Excellency Mr. Mantashe. I think from the point of view of the Federal Ministry of Power in Nigeria, a lot of the issues that are being discussed here are really very close to our strategy and the interventions that we have been working with other segments of government in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, especially the economic sustainability program, which has been chaired at the highest level of government by His Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria. So some of the discussions that we're hearing here are music to our ears, because as we all know, the challenges are quite enormous, and most countries in Africa are having fiscal crunch. So we're really keen on seeing how we can deepen some of these partnerships that we're hearing about today. As we know, the Nigerian economy is one of the biggest markets, so but also presents some of the biggest challenges. So in terms of the use of renewables, that is something that we have taken as a key policy initiative. And just last week, the federal, about 2 weeks ago, the Federal Executive Council here in Nigeria established Power Sector Economic Sustainability Committee, which is chaired by the Vice President and coordinated from the Office of the Minister of Power. And basically, this is aimed at increasing, electrification to about 25 million households, 25 million Nigerians, and 5 million households through solar home systems. And this is something that we see as a very important part of diversifying the energy mix. So we're trying to see how we can encourage private sector financing for off-grid solar and attracting, investment in solar manufacturing. I'm glad to hear some of the recommendations of the speaker from Senegal calling on Elon Musk to come and establish manufacturing capacity on the continent. And that is something that we think is very important too. We hope to reduce import dependence in the effort to expand the use of these renewables. Already there has been some facilities that have been created by the Central Bank of Nigeria and some participating financial institutions. So we're really trying to find ways to partner with other international organizations. We've been working through the other regional fora, like the West African Power Pool, and just about a week ago, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement was also ratified by the Federal Executive Council. So all these are meant to actually help improve the capacity of the Nigerian government to actually address this challenge of post-COVID recovery in a most holistic and effective way, so to speak. And we are always looking forward for opportunities to continue to partner with international organizations and our neighboring fellow African countries. So we really, just to further extend the Honorable Minister's goodwill, and to also say we are open to collaborating with all the participants and countries. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Merci. Donc, excuse acceptée pour le ministre également et prête également, comme on l'a dit, pour le partenariat régional, mais également la coopération internationale pour ce dossier PowerPool et les accords de libre-échange. Alors, je vais donner la parole à M. Pamniaï de FMI. M. Pamniaï?
Merci, Madame Chair. Bonjour tout le monde et merci de m'accueillir ici. Je n'avais pas de remarque particulière pour cette réunion. Je peux m'exprimer en anglais si vous voulez ou en français, c'est comme vous voulez.
Il y a la traduction simultanée.
Okay, thanks a lot and good morning, everybody. I've been listening very carefully to all the points that were made, and I would like just to share a few perspectives in terms of how we see the economy, the region being impacted by COVID-19. As some of you have noted, in terms of the health crisis, the impact has been smaller than in other regions. with a number of cases of about 1.2 million people impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. However, on the health side, the pandemic has had on the economic side, sorry, a devastating impact on the region, with growth expected to decline by about 3% this year in 2020, and to recover to about 3.1% in 2021. When you look at the cumulative impact, however, you are talking about declines of 4.5% in GDP per capita, which is much more than what other countries in the world will suffer by. And I think importantly, the crisis really threatens to undo most of the progress that was achieved by the countries in the region over the last decade or so. You mentioned, some of your colleagues mentioned earlier, the progress that was being made in providing access to electricity. But the same is true in terms of the progress that was being made in improving social outcomes like education, health, and so on. So it is really important then that the international community comes to help and support the region to address this crisis. As noted by one of your colleagues, the fiscal space that countries in the region benefit from is much smaller than in other regions. So, and therefore, the fiscal response has been much more limited to around 2% of GDP on average across countries, and this has not been enough. Energy-dependent economies have been hit very hard. Tourism-dependent economies have been hit very hard. And going forward, it will be critical for countries to find a way to build better. And part of it will be through laying the ground for sustainable and inclusive growth, or greener growth, as you say. The challenge for energy dependent economies will be then to diversify, and it is really heartening to hear the commitment that all of you have to promote this, to diversify the sources of energy, to diversify the sources of growth in the economies. From our part, the fund has stepped up its support to the countries through our catastrophe contingent relief trust by improving lending. During this crisis, we lent about 12 times as much as what we typically do in a year to the region. And we were very encouraged to see the G20 come together to provide debt service relief to countries in the region. Now, that said, it is still not enough. There will be a need to increase financing. Yes, I'll finish. And that means more grants, more debt relief, and the participation of the private sector through various means, including PPPs and more innovative ways of financing development needs. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Merci, Monsieur Ndiaye, sur cette note d'espoir, parce que, comme vous le dites, nous avons besoin d'une augmentation des financements, alléger les dettes et faire des dons. Ce partenariat public-privé, nous n'avons pas le choix parce qu'il faut que des investisseurs viennent en Afrique. Mais si vous prêtez l'argent, ça devrait aller. C'est dommage. Nous sommes à la fin de la deuxième session parce que la première session a trop débordé. Et nous comptons beaucoup sur ces institutions, partenaires financiers, pour prêter à l'Afrique, mais prêter également, et cette coopération internationale par rapport aux échanges de technologies. Et donc, sans plus tarder, je vais redonner la parole à M. Burol, directeur exécutif de l'AIE.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair, for your very able moderation of this session, and also all the speakers. We learned a lot. We learned their preoccupation. We noted their suggestion. I am sure many other colleagues who are following this event noted the same concerns and suggestions. Now, we are at the end of our meeting. May I ask my colleague, Madam Commissioner, to say a few closing words before I close the meeting? Madam Commissioner.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Birol. Avant de peut-être de lancer, enfin de lire mon mot de clôture, je tiens à exprimer mon grand plaisir à voir et écouter les interventions, bien sûr, que nous avons entendues, mais surtout à saluer la présence de deux commissaires femmes de l'Union africaine et de l'Union européenne, deux ministres femmes, une européenne, une africaine. Ça fait grand plaisir. Et je crois qu'il nous faut de plus en plus, allant de l'avant, voir plus de postes de décision et de politique, surtout dans le domaine des infrastructures, de l'énergie, transport et autres, occupés par des femmes. Donc, c'est un vrai plaisir et c'est une très bonne indication. Donc, je ne pouvais pas ne pas peut-être dire cela et passer de cette observation. Ceci dit, je vais peut-être maintenant tourner à mon mot de clôture, si vous le permettez bien. Honorable ministers, excellencies, and of course, Dr. Fatih Birol, the executive director of the IEA, distinguished participants and guests. I think we all agree that this has been a very informative, stimulating, and timely forum and discussions. And as we've seen, it has covered a wide range of issues around the theme for our event, the Securing Africa's Energy Future in the wake of COVID-19. Many of the speakers have highlighted the need for faster recovery by prioritizing increased investments, even embracing innovation, strengthening partnerships. The rich mix of participation has enabled different perspectives and ideas to be shared on these issues. This, I'm sure, will go a long way in informing the policy direction and decision-making processes for us at the African Union, but also, I'm sure, in other African countries. As I think we all said, the recovery must be anchored on an inclusion, sustainable, and green pathway. The high-level participation of the UK and Italy in the context of COP26 partnership was instrumental in cementing the notion of green recovery for a prosperous future. Despite the difficulties imposed by the pandemic, the world and Africa must fiercely resist the temptation to take an unsustainable recovery pathway. We don't have to choose between economic growth and a safe climate. We can have both. We can choose better growth and a better climate. Fortunately, renewable energy technologies have proven their resilience during the pandemic, which is a very good sign for the sector in its future prospects. And this has been mentioned in many interventions and how, the price competitiveness allows us now to do that. It has also been mentioned that for the time being, Africa cannot completely omit the fossil fuel, that we are in a transition phase, that innovation allows us to do much better, and that an improved energy mix is also something that we in Africa are working on aggressively. And we've seen from the experience of some African countries how we are talking about 40, 50% or even more of renewable in that energy mix. Maintaining focus on the achievement of, focus to achieve the SDG 7 and objectives of the Agenda 2063 must be emphasized and resist COVID-19 pandemic from eroding or reversing much of the progress made. And it was really alarming to see that we are going backward. It is a fact that measures put in place to tackle the pandemic have adversely affected African power utilities and off-grid developers and other aspects in the sector. But again, I am glad to know that there has been, new ideas, call for participation of private sector, improve regulatory environment, and other ways, to do things differently and meaningfully. The AU response recovery plan takes cognizance of the fact of this fact and builds on the deep analysis of our partners, as was so ably highlighted by the IEA in their presentation of the outlook, and articulated by several contributions during today's forum discussion. The objective, therefore, is not only to mitigate the effects of the pandemic, but to build a robust and strategic sector playing a key role in the recovery and growth and regional integration of our continent, Africa. Having said that, I know that increasing investment goes hand in hand with availability and ease of accessing financing. This underscores the importance of comprehensive policy regulatory frameworks to support holistic, conducive business environment. This has come out clearly in this forum as an area requiring a multifaceted approach, leveraging on digital innovations, multilateral cooperation. I did mention that the African integration agenda and the African free trade area in particular will play an increasingly greater role in opening up the investment space in the continent. Maybe last but not least, we need more deliberate efforts to support the clean cooking sector, which is seriously lagging behind in Africa. And the AUC has recently concluded a study on modernizing cooking and gender mainstreaming, which will contribute and strengthen the discourse and policy input. I once again wish to deeply thank all of you for this active, informative, insightful participation and invaluable contributions, and to thank our generous host, South Africa, for this forum. Thank the IEA and AUC teams for fantastic preparations and organization. Deeply honored and look forward to participation in future fora. And I thank you.
So thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. Just to finish the meeting, many thanks to all the ministers and other government officials attending to this meeting. What I understood from my colleagues is it is one of the best attended energy meetings in Africa this year, and many thanks to all the ministers, and especially to Madam Commissioner and Minister Mantashe of South Africa. Many issues were discussed, and Madam Commissioner gave a very good summary. But if I have to pick up one thing, just one thing, in my view, the key issue here is how we get the investment in under these circumstances. And here, what is happening? Because I said the demand is big in Africa. Energy demand, electricity demand will increase. The potential is there. Solar energy, the hydropower, gas, whatever you want, everything is there. But why investment is not coming as much as we want? Because investors see a certain risk for investing. And now many countries' risk profile is getting going in the wrong direction. And what is the road blockade there? In my view, many of them, but one of them is key: increasing debt problem, debt challenge of the countries. The higher the debt challenge is, the riskier is the investment, the more difficult to get the investor in. So therefore, we talk on many issues. I could have highlighted many things, but if there is one thing, the international organizations who have participated in this meeting, many governments, donor countries, may need to look at this issue, debt issue. We had this issue in the past. We dealt with it. I know conditions are different now, but I hope that we deal with the debt issue once again in a way that it wouldn't be a road blockade for the economic development of African countries, and as such wouldn't impede investment to flow in. where it is badly needed and which will bring Africa to the next level of economic development. With this, I would like to close the second African Union Commission IEA Ministerial meeting. I really hope that, dear colleagues, the third one will take place in Paris this time. I would like to invite all of you to Paris. We have wonderful headquarters, wonderful meeting rooms here. And Paris is not Paris is a beautiful city, I can assure you. And many of you know Paris maybe better than me even. But it will be great to host all of you in Paris, hopefully next year for the third African Union meeting. And I hope that the situation, energy situation, investment situation, economic situation, but most importantly, the health situation around the world will be better. I thank you very much and all the best to all of you from International Energy Agency headquarters. Thank you very much.